we sat down and devised new strategies and frameworks to engage a brave new post-pandemic world. These are many threads that the Raisina Dialogue 2025 weaves together for you. Kalachakra, people, peace, and planet, the proposition that brings us here today. Our Prime Minister has invested in these through his decisions and actions. The US and European leadership has expressed the same desire. Many number of leaders from the Global South also expect the same from the frameworks that we so design. When we all seek the same end, why are we so far apart? Let us bridge the distance here in New Delhi at the Raisina Dialogue. Conversations are the first step towards peace, progress, and prosperity. However hard the circumstances, we cannot allow dialogue to die. We must shun the culture of cancelling each other. We must listen and we must work constructively towards lasting solutions. But as a conference organizer, let me just tell you, there are more demands for speaking roles than there are for sitting in the audience. Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, sitting before us, has demonstrated the power of listening. Since 2017, he has attended the Raisina Dialogue every year and spoken only once, setting a personal example about the importance of listening, absorbing, and understanding. His tireless efforts to promote dialogue on the world stage are also an inspiration. As he urged us recently, quoting the poet Rumi, "Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder." Our hearts are filled with pride that Raisina Dialogue has evolved into a truly global public square. Incubated by India and nurtured by the world, this arena has allowed 1,000 ideas to bloom, nourished by the constant showers of wisdom that does not take anything as a given, that challenges what is, and dares to visualize what could be. I welcome you all once again to the dialogue and to our Raisina family. Let us debate, let us disagree, and let us discover. And let this begin now. Thank you so much for joining us in New Delhi. Let me now invite the chairman of the Observer Research Foundation, Mr. Sanjay Joshi, to introduce the theme and our speaker this evening. Mr. Joshi.
A very good evening to our distinguished guests, Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, our guest of honor, Excellency Christopher Luxon, Prime Minister of New Zealand, Honorable External Affairs Minister, Shri Jaishankar, our partners from the Ministry of External Affairs, and all the other ministers, admirals, generals, speakers, and delegates, and the audience which is gathered here, distinguished members, many of whom are also joining online. Welcome to Raisina 2025. When conflicts challenge order, when we struggle to make sense of the road ahead, we seek anchor in metaphors and in symbols. I remember, last year, when conflicts were raging in Europe and West Asia, we had assembled Raisina under the banner of Chaturang, that ancient board game of war and craft. This year, as conflicts nudge themselves towards a peace which sometimes seems more conflicted than the wars itself, the theme chosen is Kalachakra, the wheel of time. First of all, the metaphor of the wheel actually challenges the linear notion of the arrow of time as something which is constantly moving forward inexorably towards progress and growth. The chakra, gives no such false assurances. The unending progress of any civilization, of any nation or race, or manifest destiny of anyone is not guaranteed by any cosmic order. We repeat mistakes, our best intents lead to consequences we never intended, and order frequently does descend into chaos. The chakra actually signifies a motion which is far more complex than the circular monotony of a wheel. It is about cycles of decay and cycles of renewal. It is about the dance of the planets, which is set in motion by a balance of mutually opposite forces. There's a centrifugal force that, left to itself, can cause the dance of the stars to unravel. They can just be flung out of course. And opposing it is a centripetal force, always recentering things, pulling things towards the center. Should that centripetal force run riot, the system starts imploding, collapsing upon itself into a black hole which sucks up everything, mass, energy, to end in a dead world from which even light cannot escape. At one extreme of the spinning vortex of time is a fragmenting order, which is called the mandal, the fragmenting pattern, tearing apart the cohesion of societies, disrupting the environmental balance, hyper-individualism, ecological collapse, dissipating into a world of entropic decay. At the other end lies a collapse mandal, the collapse pattern, overly rigid, homogenized, a world of authoritarianism and ecological monocultures, where over-integration stifles innovation, and instead of change and evolution, even time freezes unmoving. So central to this whole idea of Kalachakra, which is a theme of this conference, is the idea of impermanence. No state, thankfully, lasts forever, for each contains the seed of its opposite. That makes it not just a non-linear system, it also makes it a non-binary system. A non-binary system cannot be understood in very mechanistic, dualistic terms. It cannot be understood in terms of black and white. There's too much color in it. Because to do that is to lose nuance, to be unable to understand the nature of complexity and be defeated by complexity. So Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which our Prime Minister keeps on urging, is that ideal in the cosmic order, one that is offered as an all-encompassing guide for a world that is impermanent, interdependent, and infinitely interconnected. In truth, everything around us, is this dance of Kal, time, and Mandal, which is order. And that fundamentally challenges humans. Remember, in Buddhism, ultimately, this calibration between the two is not defined as a goal. It is defined as a practice. It is something which must be kept on constantly. It is not an endpoint. And to do that, it challenges conscious humans, thinking humans, to engage through thought and through action to practice bringing that order back together again, that balance back together again. So we meet to celebrate a decade of Raisina in 2025, to examine precisely that world of thought and action, which helps us recognize that every movement, whether tightening into unity or fraying into disorder, also contains the seed of its opposite. In the final analysis, in the Kalachakra, neither order nor chaos are endpoints. They're merely transitory phases which demand recalibration. And recalibration is a time for sometimes difficult and unconventional decisions. So at ORF, we extend our welcome and best wishes to everyone here for 3 days of the most thought-provoking conversations. And I'm delighted this year to present His Excellency Christopher Luxon, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Sir, Kalachakra is about change. And as a corporate leader, you have led change. You transformed Air New Zealand into one of the world's most successful and respected carriers. Then you've entered politics to try and do much the same for your great country. We have brought, you bring that pragmatic approach to international trade, technology partnerships, and defense cooperation that is helping New Zealand deepen ties across the world, and especially to countries like India and countries situated in the Indo-Pacific. With that, may I invite you, sir, to join us here and give us the benefit of your vast wisdom and experience. Thank you, sir.
Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, Kia ora, and good afternoon, everyone. What an absolute honour it is to stand on this stage to inaugurate this august dialogue with none other than the Honourable Prime Minister Modi. My good friend, can I say thank you so much for generously welcoming me to India and for our very warm discussions that we had this morning. I'm a great admirer of your extraordinary achievements as Prime Minister, as you know. In the almost 11 years that you've occupied the Prime Minister's office, you have weathered the COVID storm and still managed to expand India's economy by 50%. You have lifted 250 million of your countrymen out of poverty and eliminated extreme poverty. And today, India is at the leading edge of technology with massive innovative potential. You were the first country to land on the moon's south pole, and in the process drawing the world's attention to India's extraordinary technological prowess. And Prime Minister, during your tenure, the men in blue have been the most dominant side in cricket's white ball competitions, most recently winning the Champions Trophy last week in Dubai against my men in black. Yes. And breaking many, many New Zealanders' hearts in the process, including mine, but I will be the bigger person and just say congratulations. Among this catalogue of achievements is the reason that we gather today, the Raisina Dialogue, a forum that provides a moment every year for thought leaders from across the world to focus their collective minds on the contemporary strategic challenges being navigated right here in the Indian Ocean. And I applaud Dr. Jaishankar and Samir Saran for the intellectual leadership that they have shown driving this dialogue over the past 10 years. It has grown into a hugely influential forum. And look no further than the luminaries that you attract. 6 former heads of government and ministers from over 30 countries and representation from so many more here today. And I just hope that my remarks today add to the debate in some small way. Ladies and gentlemen, it is more than 200 years since Indians and New Zealanders began living side by side. At the beginning of the 19th century, well before we became a nation, Indian sailors jumped ship in New Zealand, with some meeting up with locals and marrying into our indigenous Maori tribes. And a few years later, Maori traders began travelling to Kolkata to sell tree trunks used in sailing ships, an exchange that echoes down the ages. And just as they were 200 years ago, Kiwi Indians today are fully integrated into our multicultural society. New Zealanders of Indian heritage comprise 11% of the people living in Auckland, our biggest city. And I've brought with me to New Delhi a selection of the Kiwi Indian community leaders, members of parliament, captains of industry, yes, professional cricketers, and even an online influencer who has revolutionised investment for women the world over. In short, a selection of Kiwi Indians who get up each and every single morning to make New Zealand a better place to live. And our trade has diversified considerably from wood thanks to the increased sophistication of your economy. India today is a critical source of pharmaceuticals and machinery for us, while we are a great tourism and education destination for you. And India has become an ever more significant feature of our society. And yet while there has much that has been developed and changed, there has been something missing at the core of our relationship. With a country as consequential as India, we need rich political interaction, engaged militaries, strong economic architecture, and connections that support a diaspora that bridges between our two great nations. Prime Minister Modi and I sat down today and we charted out the future of our two countries' relationship, a future that builds from where we have been and one that is wholly more ambitious about what we will do together in the future. We agreed to our defence forces building greater strategic trust with one another while deploying together and training together more. We want our scientists collaborating on global challenges like climate change and on commercial opportunities like space. We are supporting our businesses to improve air links and build primary sector cooperation. We will facilitate students and young professionals and tourists to move between our two countries. and we've instructed our trade negotiators to get on and negotiate a comprehensive free trade agreement between our two great nations. A comprehensive agenda to underpin a comprehensive relationship. And as we both look to the future, the opportunity for both of our governments is to sustain that momentum, not only to follow through on the commitments that we have made to one another, but to proactively build on that platform by exploring new opportunities and creating new architecture, to ensure that we are creating strategic trust and commercial connection between two countries at the bookends of our wider Indo-Pacific region. Ladies and gentlemen, it is to the Indo-Pacific that I now turn. And there are many reasons to be excited about our region, and I want to single out the two biggest opportunities. First, India and New Zealand are fortunate enough to live in the world's most economically dynamic region. The Indo-Pacific will represent 2/3 of global economic growth over the coming years. And by 2030, it will be home to 2/3 of the world's middle-class consumers. And India itself lies at the heart of this exciting economic future. And it's easy to focus on the troubles the world faces, but it's worth reflecting for a moment on what economic development at this scale means at a human level. Here in India, you've gone from only the very few in rural areas having a water or power connection to almost everyone. And that means that people have better health and education outcomes, and that in turn creates hope and optimism about the future for individuals and their families. Replicated across literally hundreds of millions of people, that process of development generates dynamic economies, growth that offers massive opportunities for every country in the Indo-Pacific region and the families and the individuals within them. Now, the second big opportunity is technological change. We are on the cusp of a transformation of our economies and societies in a way that we can barely now imagine. I'm talking about artificial intelligence, which is within reach of achieving the cognitive powers of a human being. But I'm also thinking of a range of other technologies, quantum, biotech, advanced manufacturing, that are going to have profound impacts on our economies. And it has felt like this technological transformation has been long heralded, but never quite arrived. Well, it seems to me that a series of innovations, the always online world, big data, powerful computing, machine learning, accumulating in ways that are going to tip over into a dislocation that is new and altogether different. The game is about to change because we are on the cusp of an explosion in the application of AI, a technology that will have an impact across the whole economy, not just in one or two sectors, a technology that will transform the way that we work, the way that we study, and the way that we entertain ourselves, a technology that will force governments to think in entirely different ways about how they deliver public services and secure their nations. And certainly this presents risks that will need to be managed. For example, militaries are already using AI, which means the international community is going to need to develop new norms about how this is done in a way that ensures compliance with the rules of war and also ensures human responsibility in conflict. But my message is that while we need to manage that change, we cannot allow ourselves to be paralysed by the risks. For those who believe that they can outcompete through this period of technological disruption and dislocation, the opportunities are there. The citizens, the companies, and the countries that embrace the coming change will be the ones that reap the dividends. Yet there's also no doubt that there are fundamental trend lines in the Indo-Pacific that present geostrategic risks to both growth and prosperity. And these have long-term drivers that are not going away and have been amplified by recent events. Past assumptions that underpin the previous generation's geopolitical calculations are being totally upended. A fortnight ago, the Singaporean Foreign Minister, Vivian Balakrishnan, put this change very eloquently when he said, "The world is now shifting from unipolarity to multipolarity, from free trade to protectionism, from multilateralism to unilateralism, from globalization to hypernationalism, from openness to xenophobia, and from optimism to anxiety." This is a global change, not isolated to one region. And certainly though we live today in an Indo-Pacific navigating contest and rivalry with a period of strategic uncertainty, I think there are three big shifts that make for challenging times for all of us ahead. The first is that we are seeing rules giving way to power. Previously, we could count on countries respecting the UN Charter, the law of the sea, and world trade rules. That sadly cannot be assumed in an age of sharper competition. And instead, we risk dangerous miscalculation at flashpoints, and these range from the militarisation of disputed reefs to dangerous air movements, from land border incursions to breakout nuclear capabilities. And of course, it's not just flashpoints, but a slow shift in Indo-Pacific realities that change calculations. Recent demonstrations of naval force near New Zealand's maritime surrounds, for example, sent a signal that alarmed many of my fellow citizens. Second, we are witnessing a shift from economics to security. Because after the Cold War, the dominant paradigm in relations between Indo-Pacific countries was a sustained effort to raise the material living standards by tending to our economies. And make no mistake, bread and butter issues still loom very, very large and are a priority for governments all around the region. And indeed, economic growth is my government's highest priority too. But across the Indo-Pacific, we also see governments dedicating increased attention and resource to military modernisation. Military build-ups reflect a need to prepare against uncertainty and against insecurity. And some military build-ups, however, are underway without the reassurance that transparency brings. National security demands are expanding. Governments need to protect their people and assets against foreign interference, cyber attacks and terrorism. In the last few months, a new threat has emerged with damage to critical infrastructure like subsea cables. Well, you can't have prosperity without security, not least when the tools of commerce themselves require protection. The third big geo-economic shift, as I see it, is from efficiency to resilience. Where previously Indo-Pacific economies saw even deeper interdependence as a dynamo for growth, that can no longer be assumed in an age of decoupling. Onshoring, protectionism and trade wars are displacing best price, open markets and integrated supply chains. And so we find ourselves in a world that is growing more difficult and more complex, and especially so for smaller states. However, we must engage with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And so, like most countries across the region, New Zealand's strategic policy is being shaped by our assessment of these trends. We have agency to shape the Indo-Pacific that we all want, but we must do so with energy and with urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, as New Zealand looks to protect and advance our interests in the Indo-Pacific, we can only do so alongside partners like India that have a significant role to play in the Indo-Pacific region. In an increasingly multipolar world, India's size and geostrategic heft gives you autonomy. And at the same time, your democratic partners in the Indo-Pacific offer you a force multiplier for our convergent interests. For at a time when democracy is in decline with less than half the world's adults electing their leaders, it truly is an inspiration that 650 million Indians turned out to vote last year in the largest election in history. Your national election is a triumph of logistics, but it's also a triumph of legitimacy. An election that means your leaders serve their people rather than your people serving their leaders. Now, I don't advocate arbitrary divisions between democracies and autocracies, and just because we are democracies, we won't always see eye to eye. Nonetheless, there's truth in the fact that our democratic governance means that we share a belief in the freedom to choose, giving everyone a voice and respect for the rules. Our interests increasingly converge around seeing three ideas as an aligned set of organising principles for our Indo-Pacific region. And the first is that we want to live in an Indo-Pacific where countries are free to choose their own path, free from interference. A region where no one country comes to dominate. And it is a sign of the times that I have to stand here defending respect for sovereignty, yet New Zealand's approach is increasingly shaped around that objective. Just on Saturday, I joined a call led by Prime Minister Starmer focused on what more those contributing to Ukraine's defence can do to support a just and lasting peace, to help a country whose sovereignty and territorial integrity has been so flagrantly attacked. And in my own home region, our fellow Pacific neighbours are navigating geostrategic dynamics that are their sharpest in nearly 80 years. And in a deeply contested world, Pacific partners are being asked to make choices that may undermine their national sovereignty. They risk falling into over-indebtedness. They must make choices about dual-use infrastructure, and they face pressure to enter new security arrangements. New Zealand invests in working alongside Pacific countries to boost their capacity to make independent choices free from interference. Yet size alone cannot inoculate a country from these dynamics. Building strong and diversified relationships is the key to mitigating the risk of dependence on a few. And that is why my government is investing in our key relationships, from traditional partners to thickening and deepening our relationships across Southeast Asia, and in a serious way with India too. And we have a responsibility to invest in our own security as a down payment on our future ability to choose our own path. And that is why New Zealand will be scaling up and doing more to support our own defence. We plan to better resource and equip our defence force to ensure that we can continue to defend our interests, whether in our near region, in our alliance with Australia, or in support of collective security efforts with partners like India. Alongside this investment in capability, we're making tangible contributions across the Indo-Pacific. When I was in Japan last year, for example, I saw firsthand the work of our aviators and what they do to detect and deter North Korea's sanctions-busting activities. The New Zealand Navy is leading Combined Task Force 150, responsible for multinational activities to protect trade routes and counter smuggling, piracy and terrorism in the Indian Ocean and Gulf of Aden. We are fortunate indeed that India has agreed to take up the deputy command. And underlining these naval connections, one of our frigates, Takaha, is in Mumbai later this week. But as we seek an Indo-Pacific in which countries are free to choose their own path, I'm determined that New Zealand plays its role, whether through our work with Pacific Island partners, our relationship in the Indo-Pacific, or through our own defence efforts. Now, the second principle both India and New Zealand subscribe to is the criticality of Indo-Pacific regional institutions, even as these evolve. Regional architecture scaffolds our region's security and its prosperity. ASEAN continues to promote regional peace and economic development through its convening power and its centrality. It also provides a place for the region's players to come together to discuss strategic issues. ASEAN sits at the centre of the East Asia Summit, which for 20 years now has enabled political dialogue across the region, a forum that builds understanding, like this one, that reduces the risk of miscalculation and contributes to strategic trust. Yet the Indo-Pacific architecture is not static as it adapts to new realities, and many-lateral groupings are important new pieces of the puzzle. The Quad has emerged as an important vehicle promoting an open, stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. And India's contribution to that evolution, of course, has been vital. And while New Zealand has no pretensions to Quad membership, we stand ready to work with you to advance Quad initiatives. We ourselves are strengthening our work with Japan and the Republic of Korea, as well as Australia. And last year I convened the Indo-Pacific Four to discuss Ukraine and North Korea. And with serious headwinds buffeting the global trade system, New Zealand has seriously invested in Indo-Pacific trade and economic integration groupings. From the CPTPP, the gold standard of FTAs and internationally, through to the RCEP, perhaps the world's most inclusive agreement. And we welcome India's engagement in the regional economic architecture with our work together in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, important in an area in which we seek to build one another's resilience. And the third Indo-Pacific principle that we align around is a region in which respect for the rules is foundational. Globally, rules are being undermined, whether those around territorial integrity, freedom of navigation, or laws of war. Yet these are the very rules that preserve an Indo-Pacific order that is not might is right alone. And as I've said before, there is no prosperity without security. The rules that underpin our security also allow our businesses to operate with great certainty, and those rules deliver daily in meaningful ways for our people and our populations. For example, 1 in 4 jobs in New Zealand rely on exports, and our exporting businesses being able to depend on the predictability that those rules deliver. And in a miracle that's only possible thanks to globally accepted aviation standards, 120,000 flights carry 12 million passengers and operate safely between their destinations each and every day. These rules shape the character of our region. And we must remain committed to this rules-based system, even while acknowledging its very shortcomings. And it is a truism that the world of 2025 is vastly different from 1945, and our global institutions sadly have been way too slow to adapt. So we're not talking about starting over by remaking the global order. Instead, I tend to agree with Dr. Jaishankar when he says that we want an order in which change is evolutionary at a pace that is comfortable and steady. And that's why New Zealand supports reforming global governance frameworks to better reflect today's realities. Rather than casting them aside, they should give greater voice to the developing world and underrepresented regions. Countries like India, that plays such a central role in the global community, should have a seat at the table. And we've therefore long advocated and supported India having a permanent seat on a reformed UN Security Council. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it has been truly a privilege to speak with you today at this important forum for global dialogue. The geostrategic picture I've painted is quite stark. Rules are giving way to power, economics to security, and efficiency to resilience. And the tectonic shifts unfolding highlight that we, working alongside partners and friends, must navigate disruption, uncertainty, and sharpening pressure on our national interests. Yet we will not be overwhelmed by complexity and challenge. We must go forward with great confidence. We live at the heart of the world's most exciting and dynamic region, the Indo-Pacific. We live in an era of technological transformation that offers outsized opportunities. And we are countries with solid underlying democratic institutions which will underpin our society's future success. India and New Zealand have extraordinarily talented people, and both our countries have a clear plan that reflects and reinforces the connections between our security and our prosperity. We cannot afford to be thrown by the rapid pace of change. We must grapple with shifting realities and capitalise on these for all of our people's benefits. We will create and seize opportunities. We will invest in our capabilities. This is our region, and its future will be shaped by the choices that we all make together. Thank you, ngā mihi nui, and dhanyavad. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, and a special thank you for not reminding us of the Test match series in October last year. With that, let me now request Dr. Jaishankar, the Foreign Minister of India, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening. It's my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks that will conclude the Raisina Dialogue's inauguration this evening. First, let me thank the chief guest, Prime Minister the Right Honourable Christopher Luxon of New Zealand. As all of you can see, he not only has considerable knowledge of India, but a real commitment to advance our ties. His perspectives on the Indo-Pacific are particularly valuable at a time when the world is debating the nature of the global order. To Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I would reiterate our deep appreciation for his vision and motivation that has driven the Raisina Dialogue. As we begin its 10th edition, I hope that we have lived up to his expectations of India hosting a world-class gathering. To the ORF, I can only restate how much the Ministry of External Affairs values our partnership, and we are glad to see it now expressed across different geographies. But most of all, to all of you, participants and delegates, the Raisina would not be what it has become without you. Please keep coming, please keep arguing, please keep listening. Ladies and gentlemen, the world order is clearly undergoing a great churn. This requires leadership, the kind that we have in the room today. It requires systems to think differently, not simply falling back on old assumptions to deal with new situations. And it requires honest conversations, fresh ideas, and creative solutions. The value proposition that Raisina offers in that regard is higher than ever. So I know I speak for all of you in saying, let the dialogue begin. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now remain seated as the VIPs exit the room. And just give us a little more of your time for this inauguration ceremony. We will have you out soon. You've been invited to specific dinners. Please attend those. Some have been invited to our gala opening dinner in the lawns outside. We look forward to receiving you there. But do allow the VIPs to leave the room.
तो आप सीधे दृश्य देख रहे थे रायसीना डायलॉग से। भारत का प्रमुख कूटनीतिक सम्मेलन रायसीना डायलॉग आज से शुरू हो गया है, जो 19 मार्च तक चलेगा। अपने आप में बेहद महत्वपूर्ण है। जो इसकी थीम है वो भी
pharmaceuticals and machinery for us, while we are a great tourism and education destination for you. And India has become an ever more significant feature of our society. And yet, while there has much that has been developed and changed, there has been something missing at the core of our relationship. With a country as consequential as India, we need rich political interaction, engaged militaries, strong economic architecture, and connections that support a diaspora that bridges between our two great nations. Prime Minister Modi and I sat down today and we charted out the future of our two countries' relationship, a future that builds from where we have been and one that is wholly more ambitious about what we will do together in the future. We agreed to our defence forces building greater strategic trust with one another while deploying together and training together more. We want our scientists collaborating on global challenges like climate change and on commercial opportunities like space. We are supporting our businesses to improve air links and build primary sector cooperation. We will facilitate students and young professionals and tourists to move between our two countries. And we've instructed our trade negotiators to get on and negotiate a comprehensive free trade agreement between our two great nations. A comprehensive agenda to underpin a comprehensive relationship. And as we both look to the future, the opportunity for both of our governments is to sustain that momentum, not only to follow through on the commitments that we have made to one another, but to proactively build on that platform by exploring new opportunities and creating new architecture, to ensure that we are creating strategic trust and commercial connection between two countries at the bookends of our wider Indo-Pacific region. Ladies and gentlemen, it is to the Indo-Pacific that I now turn. And there are many reasons to be excited about our region, and I want to single out the two biggest opportunities. First, India and New Zealand are fortunate enough to live in the world's most economically dynamic region. The Indo-Pacific will represent 2/3 of global economic growth over the coming years. And by 2030, it will be home to 2/3 of the world's middle-class consumers. And India itself lies at the heart of this exciting economic future. And it's easy to focus on the troubles the world faces, but it's worth reflecting for a moment on what economic development at this scale means at a human level. Here in India, you've gone from only the very few in rural areas having a water or power connection to almost everyone. And that means that people have better health and education outcomes, and that in turn creates hope and optimism about the future for individuals and their families. Replicated across literally hundreds of millions of people, that process of development generates dynamic economies, growth that offers massive opportunities for every country in the Indo-Pacific region and the families and the individuals within them.